Hey everybody. So after my last video on optimizing IL-2 Korea CPU performance, I had some comments from some folks saying that I should try Process Lasso for even more performance. So for those who don't know what Process Lasso is, it's a third-party tool that lets you set affinity or CPU thread assignment for virtually any process running in Windows. Now before I go any further, I want to clear up some confusion from the last video. This only is going to really apply for asymmetric CPUs, where you have different CPU cores that are optimized for different tasks. If you have a single CCD 9800 X3D, for example, you do not need to worry about this and probably can just go watch something else. Now to recap how Asymmetric X3D chips work by default in Windows 11, as long as you have a balanced power plan and you're up to date on your latest chipset drivers, for the vast majority of games you don't need to do anything. The only reason why Korea wasn't working properly in its current state is that the game bar wasn't detecting it as a game. And as soon as you override that, it suddenly does, and it gets scheduled on the X3D cores as it should. Windows achieves this by core parking. That's effectively disabling the frequency cores, putting them to sleep, so 100% of the processes get scheduled onto the X3D cores, including your games. But wait, you might ask, what if I want everything else in Windows to run on the frequency cores, so that the game can then get the X3D cores all to itself? So to conduct this test, I used the same manual benchmark loop where I counted the distance of the waypoint down to 10, and then I captured a 60-second trace. The difference this time though is I took the time to capture 3 samples each, so this accounts for any variance in my manual flight pattern. I also intentionally did not record anything as I didn't want OBS to interfere, and so I first captured the existing game bar method where the frequency cores are parked. I then downloaded and installed Process Lasso. With IL-2 Korea running, I went into the options, CPU sets, and then set IL-2 series.exe to 0/15, and then with an asterisk to 16 through 31. There are many ways to configure this, but this is what I landed on as it's the softer approach to setting affinity, and still gives the Windows scheduler some freedom to assign threads within the assigned CCD. All right, so let's jump into this data. So we have the Lasso runs on the top, and then the balanced runs right after that, and then a frequency run at the very bottom. This is in order of average FPS. So you'll see that the 3 Lasso runs are beating the balanced runs on average. Now, if we look at the line charts, there's a lot to look at here. That's FPS, this is frame times. You'll see that they're all kind of overlapping each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an aggregation, which is useful in this particular case where you do multiple runs of the same configuration. So let's set that up and take a look at what that is like. All right, so here we are with the aggregated data, and it's a lot easier to read. So if we hover over the 100% for the average FPS, we're getting about 5% performance uplift. And that's 100% compared to the 77% of the frequency side. If you want to look at it from the frequency perspective, what we're getting from the Vcache is about a 30% bump for those runs, so even higher than the last video, and a 36% bump if you use Lasso. So let's take a look at the line charts. Now, this is showing the aggregated runs. So we got the first run for each, and then the second run, and then the third run. There's still a lot of overlap. So the green here is Lasso. Lower is better because these are frame times. It's going to be a little bit easier to look at FPS because there is some averaging that's going on that makes the lines easier to see. In this case, higher is better. And so you'll see that they're all pretty tight. Where we're approaching those bombers, you're still not close enough to them. And then once you get close, things dive. And this is where things get CPU bound. You can see this happening on the frequency side really quickly, and it just plummets. On the X3D side, we have the red and the green. Again, the red is using the game bar parking cores, and then the green is where we have Process Lasso. The frequency cores are still active, but only the game threads are going onto the Vcache cores. So this is where we approach the bombers right here and right here and right here. You see that gap that looks like roughly on the order of about a 10 FPS gap right in that part alone. So that's pretty huge. So if we look at the variances, this is telling as well. The light blue is below 2 milliseconds. The dark blue is below 4, and the yellow is below 8, and then even the dark orange is below 12. This is differences between frames, and this is actually what presents as micro stutter to your eye. So the lower the amount of difference between two consecutive frame times, the better, the smoother things are going to look. All right, now we're looking at the frame time distribution graph. This is actually one of my favorite ways to plot performance. So on the x-axis here, we have frame times. The lower the frame time, the better your performance. So you want to be to the left of the graph. And then the y-axis is the count of frame samples that are in that distribution. So here you have the red and the green peaking on top of each other around 7 milliseconds, and then you also have it split between 10.5 and 12 for between lasso and game bar. What this is showing is actually the beginning of our benchmark where we're flying towards the bombers. This is when we get close, and they split because this is when we're CPU bound, and the lasso approach is actually performing better. We're more to the left. The game bar approach is not as performant, and it's to the right of it. And then of course you have the frequency run that's all the way over here. And so this shows not only the differences between the approaches, but also the differences between the different parts of that flight path, which I think is pretty cool to see here.
Okay, so why is Process Lasso getting us another 5% over the game bar?
Without more detailed data, I can't say for certain, but I think it is likely improving the cache performance on the X3D CCD by giving IL-2 Korea exclusive scheduling to it. The configuration I showed you does come with some drawbacks, however. You'll want to be aware that in this mode, no single process will be able to use all cores on the processor. This will harm things such as compression, video editing, slicing in 3D printer software, etc. You're effectively going to get half of the performance that you got before. And I'm betting that there's going to be some games that perform better when the frequency cores are parked and the X3D CCD is handling everything as it would out of the box. I believe there's going to be some best of both worlds configurations that you can set up with Process Lasso, where you can either create a profile for every game or have Process Lasso restore the power mode to balanced when you don't want to be in this exclusive mode that we showed in this video. I also want to add that if you're not the type that likes to tinker, just skip all of this and use the regular game bar, with the caveat that you're going to want to tell the game bar that IL-2 Korea is a game, as we showed in the previous video. The performance difference is small, and again, this only ever happens when you're CPU bound, which in this game is actually quite rare, and if you're in multiplayer, it basically never happens as far as I'm aware, as long as you're using a CPU that's relatively modern. Anyway, I hope this video has been useful, and please share your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.